about finding confidence for yourself and your horse. And the person that we're speaking to is so incredibly, not only, of course, well versed in this topic, but has such a comprehensive understanding of the landscape, even beyond horses and riders, to kind of roll it all together and give us just a really incredible perspective on this topic. And we had to go all the way across the world to get her. She's tuning in from Australia. We're here with Dr. Shelley Appleton, and I cannot wait to dive into this conversation. I know that everyone listening is super excited about this conversation too, just based on the volume of questions and messages we got ahead of time. So, Dr. Appleton, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Jessa. Lovely to be here talking
And
about my favorite topics.
yes, totally. And you're starting your day with us. It's just 8 a.m. there. We're winding down our days if we're listening from North America. But I would love for you to kind of start by sharing a little bit about your story and what brought you to the career that you're in today. Because in learning about you, I just kept like digging deeper and digging deeper because you have a really fascinating story. It's not something that I could do justice. It really is a story. It's not just a resume. So I will turn it over to you just to kind of introduce yourself and share with people who may not have seen your work before.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Well, my name's Shelley Appleton. Please don't call me doctor. That makes my it's a bit cringy. Yeah. So I grew up like everyone did, horse crazy. Was able to have wonderful parents who allowed me to enjoy riding horses, and I had. I had horses when I was younger. I had time off in my final years of school and my university years where I studied pharmacy. And when I came back into horse ownership, I wanted to do it on my own steam, not my parents' steam. So I saved up. I remember I saved up all my money and got back into horses. I leased a horse first of all, and then I saved up all this money and bought the flashiest young warm blood you've ever seen, who then proceeded to scare the hell out of me for the next 7 to 8 years. Not saying that I didn't not ride him. I got on, I rode him. I fell off him at least once a month because he'd spin me off. And I never got hurt because he spun so close to the ground that I only ever felt a short distance. But still, it was hard. And interestingly, because I did pharmacy at university and was a pharmacist, it was really interesting how I saw his problem. Like I just saw he had a medical anxiety disorder, and put all my efforts into trying to make him well by fixing him with every pill and potion I could think of, or a new saddle or whatever. I even did an entire bodywork qualification because he had a treatment once and it made him good for 24 hours. Anyway, so I have this background of being very normal, trying very hard and having my weekly lessons and things like that. And one day, this is fast forwarding it. One day, I had a person who ended up being my mentor offered to ride him for me. And I was quite sure he was going to die because he just rode those quiet quarter horses. And we're walking down to my arena, and I'm telling him everything that the horse's name was Scooter, spooked at. And I just remember looking at him. I could tell that he was like thinking I was a bit crazy for telling him that. And I said, "Don't you want to know?" And he was like, "No, just wait for him to do something." And I'm thinking crazy, because to me, that was risk management. And that's an important part of my story, right? I thought I was being sensible and smart,
Mm-hmm.
right? To do that. Anyway, he got on Scooter. Scooter proceeded to spook in the first 5 seconds at the bush next to the gate, which is what he always did. And I'm like, yeah, see? And then what this guy did is he just gave him just a bit of a kick and asked him to canter. And I'm like, and Scooter proceeded to lope around the arena like the quietest horse on the planet, past everything he was worried about both
Wow.
ways. And it was in this moment that I remember looking at it, and yeah, He rode up to me, rode straight up, made a beeline for me, rode straight up to me, and came to a halt. And I looked at him and I said, "It's me, isn't it?" And he was like, "Yeah, it's you." And I said, "What am I doing? What the hell am I doing wrong?" And he just said, "Look, you're telling him the world is terrifying and he believes you." What do I do? I said, he says, "Stop creeping around him." It's like, stop it. And that, you know what? And that's all I had to do for that horse was to stop creeping around him. So if he got worried about everything, I would just repeat it. Just say if something fell on the ground, I just drop it, drop it, drop it, and he flinched, I just repeat it, repeat it, repeat it. And you know what? That's all I had. That was how quiet that that was all I had to do. And it was really sad because I'd never been able to compete him. Yet I took him off to his first competition. Of course, he got big scores because he was the flashiest warm blood. He wasn't young then because he was 7 years older than he was, but he won everything with top scores. And a few weeks later, he died of colic. And it was heartbreaking. All right.
Oh
So
my
regret,
God.
massive regret that I own this incredible, talented, great temperamented horse that I had tortured for all those years with my expertise of thinking that that was. And then around about the same time, I had another horse that I wasn't scared of, right? That I used to do a lot of competing on, but he frustrated me because he had a really hard mouth. And it was all within this few months time period. And I was struggling with changes. He'd change, but he'd bolt off, like he'd rush off, and it'd take me at least half an arena to pull him up, which was kind of hampering my transition to the next level because that wasn't a good look in front of the judges.
Yeah.
Anyway, with one coaching session, I made his mouth bleed, and I was horrified. I was absolutely disgusted because you see, Jessa, back then I had to see blood to know that I was hurting a horse. Now I can see a horse is struggling from 50 meters away. I just have to look at its body and I can tell you.
Mhm.
Or I could even tell you from the story people write me. I can hear the horse kind of talking through it about what they don't know. Anyway, that sent me on a learning journey. And the really kind of embarrassing part of this is at university, because I became a university lecturer by that one. And my research area was actually in human learning. So I knew all about learning, like great depths of learning. But because I'd ridden as a child, the horse was within a silo. Like that knowledge had not transferred
Mhm.
until the moment that my ears pricked up when I was in a horrified state from making my horse's mouth bleed, deciding that if that was dressage, I didn't want to do it. And I heard this voice say, "There's no such thing as a hard mouthed horse. It's basically just a horse that doesn't understand the bit. Here, check it. Go see for yourself. Pick up a rein. What does it do?" So I got on my horse and I picked up one rein and he turned his head the opposite way. And right there in front of me, it was like, oh my God, he doesn't know what this means. And in 45 minutes, with one idea, I had a soft mouth horse. That blew my mind. And suddenly my knowledge and everything went collided.
Mhm.
And I became this complete and utter nerd. I had 6 horses on my property at the time. I went through them. I picked them. Like it was like every horse you gave me was like a knotted up roll of wool or something, and I just started unpicking them. And I was turned into one of those people that's the equivalent of someone that tinkers with cars in the garage. So that's what I did. Everything I had no, like, if you told me back then I'd be doing this, I would laugh my head off. I'm the greatest accidental horse trainer on the planet, but I'm lucky because of this, right? I had access to a lot of horses. I had a mentor with incredible skills that took me under his wing and helped create who I am today. But I had this literacy of this background of learning and science that allowed me to had the literacy to be able to understand all these different realms of horses. I had exposure to a lot of different disciplines, and also I also had know how to study because of all the crap that I've learned in my life. And it was like, hell, this was what I love. So I saw this transformation in myself. Then I started helping some people by accident, and then it went wild. It went wild. of people coming ask me for help because I just had this different way of looking at problems. So that's me. Sorry, it's a bit long. It's a bit of a long story, but I'm always going to tell people how I started off. I had one horse I was terrified of, and
Yeah.
one horse I made mouth bleed. Like, they were big, like slaps in the face from the horse gods.
No, I'm so glad to hear. I knew little bits of it from researching
Mm,
you, but that the culmination really is
yeah.
amazing, and it does feel so serendipitous that you are where you are now, just all
Yeah.
these little things that led up to put you in this position to help people and help horses in the way that you do. Would you I mean, you described the, like, knotted ball of yarn that you kind of start taking
Yeah.
apart when you or unraveling is probably the better word,
Yeah.
when you meet a horse. When you think about the horses that you're helping in your clinics or on a day-to-day basis, would you say it usually boils down to confidence issues, or is that oversimplifying it, or, is it misunderstandings, or is it a whole gambit of things?
It's a Okay. So you got to look at the root cause, and that's where my kind of background that I came from helps because I'm like a systems thinker, right? I look at what's connected, and I've just kept following the dots because I started off just looking at behavior because I was able to see behavior and I was able to influence behavior first. So if you asked me this 15 years ago, I would have said the horse doesn't understand and they're not confident from that, right? Now, the next thing is I would have gone, well, look, then the horses like have emotions and they form associations with things. Well, I would have said, well, not only does it not understand, but it's also it's had a negative association with that experience, right? That. Well, I'm going to tell you now that I understand it even deeper. And I have not met, look, most people that come to me, they're confusing their horse, right? The horse is confused. It doesn't, they're like the gift and the scooter, right? But when I dial it down and I find those really tricky cases, the horses that don't respond quickly to being able to show them what they have to do, because horses are smart as anything, right? If they struggle, it always boils down to a physical issue. You can track it. Even their so so their physical issue, because horses are not haven't evolved to be sat on, and when we sit on them, it has a dramatic effect. But not only that, how we keep them, and they don't move how they normally move, and they only get subjected to what we do to them. They basically leave a lot of horses lead a sedentary lifestyle,
Mhm.
right? And then they've got the ramifications of all the different quality of their hoof care and their gut. The gut is massive, huge, huge, right? And so what happens? The horse then develops, uh, just say a lack. It can be discomfort within their body, but a lot of times it can be restrictions. But a lot of times it's a sense of balance because their brain's not using what they need to use to be ridden, and the brain just kind of cuts those circuits off because if you don't use it you lose it, right? So that's where a lot of anxiety and struggle comes from, and like that's where a lot of things actually go to, and then you can get breakdown from that, but that ultimately also affects their sensory system, like how well a horse can turn, because a horse's sensory system, like just say our eyes have muscles in them that will change and focus, whereas a horse will change their head position. Because evolutionary, when you time it, doing that is quicker than having your eyes kind of go, right? But if doing that is compromised by your balance and all the patterns that you've got through your body, right? They'll start spooking at things because they'll become more reactive from that. So it's all connected. So I now track it down and I now know that's why I'm putting a lot of my research into understanding the body and what we can
Mm.
do to look after our horses that gets that body as functional and resilient to what we do with them as possible.
Okay, I can't wait to go down that path. And before I do, just as we're kind of setting the table a bit still, talk to me about the rider side of things and whether it's always a package deal. Like when you're working with people, is the rider just part of the equation and therefore needs to be addressed as you address these horses? Or are you seeing riders who in and of themselves have things that need to be overcome, like fear or confidence issues that
Oh,
you can just address just with the rider. And tell us just a little bit about like what your work like looks like for riders,
yeah.
and then we'll dig deeper.
Yeah. Well, there's a big lack of awareness. Like, there's a lot of knowledge gaps between, just say we take a really good rider like yourself, and what you do. You will not be 100% conscious of all the good things you do, right? And then, and they're not necessarily written in the books or discussed, right? Because there's a lot of things that can develop in people of how they've learned to ride, or their experience, or just within their body, right? Of how their body functions. So, mm, and what happens to the horses, the riders and the handling have a massive impact, because as soon as you create tension within a horse from it feeling threatened or alarmed, you're resetting all those things that I've talked about. You're causing stress, and that's hampering its learning, and it's hampering its body. That stress in the body is hampering how tension goes in and gets wound into everything. So, most, I'm going to say probably, I should say, yeah, I'll happily say most people are not 100% aware of how they're making sense to a horse, how the horse is perceiving them, and how you're making that horse feel. Horses are incredibly gentle creatures. That's what I can say from working with some incredibly dangerous horses. They're still restraining themselves 95% for some strange reason. Okay. We have a very strange effect on horses. They really restrain themselves, for us. So most people are not aware how they make sense to a horse, and if the horse actually understands. They're not understanding the amount of, they're not conscious of the amount of pressure they're putting on the horse to get the horse to do things, and that that matters. Just their handling. A lot of people will have no emphasis on how to lead a horse or how to catch a horse. So what they're effectively doing is they're fighting with their horse from the paddock, fighting to put the saddle on, fighting with it on the mounting block, and they get on and want a nice ride. That's the equivalent of getting in the car with your partner, having a massive fight all the way to the restaurant, then thinking you can have a lovely romantic dinner. Like, people are just not, they're oblivious to that, completely oblivious. So I need to get people aware of how to create the understanding, how to tell whether the horse actually understands or not, right? And then you've got consistency there. What's actually important in the relationship is everything, just not getting on and practicing your fancy stuff, but it's all that stuff we think is simple or means stuff to the horse. And then, yeah, don't even get me started on riding. Being actually that when we sit on the horse is not evolved to be sat on, hasn't. So when we sit on the horse, we massively disrupt it. And your ability to sit on a horse and allow what's called force transfer, or the transfer of load through the horse's body, because the horse is not just a stick with legs. Movement is created, starts in the spine. The hindquarters is the powerhouse, and then the front helps balance and change direction and things like that. That's it, very simply. And probably someone pick up and say that's really wrong, but it's just, that's a simplistic for everybody. We go sit in the goddamn middle of that, right? We disrupt the horse's ability to do that. And then there's all those other decisions that go in about your farriers, like, is your saddle fitted, and all those things then impact that as well. So yeah, I spend my time getting people very conscious of their hands to begin with, and then conscious of what their body's portraying. Because when you're nervous and you're feeling vulnerable yourself, which you can't stop, that's all subconscious, you're then snatchy, grabby, you're putting off this vibe, and you're doing exactly what I did to that beautiful, young, fabulous warm blood that I horrified, scared for 7 years. It's so I've got to unpick all this. But what I found out, if I just, I started off taking horses in and training them, and it took me like 5 seconds to work out that was a faulty idea, because I trained these horses. They'd be beautiful. Unpick them all. They'd be beautiful. They got their trust back. And then I handed them back to the devil. And that was interesting. That was confronting. So it was just like, yeah, yeah, I'll help you with your horse. I'm going to teach you how to do it. And it was
Right.
amazing what happened then. It was amazing how effective that was, and how it set those people up to go on and do some pretty good things and elevate themselves from, like, amateur riders to go up and actually compete and do things. And even some of them become professional trainers themselves today. So that's pretty impressive. Or
Mhm.
the lady that's in her late 50s that's starting a horse for the first time, being able to do that type of thing. Yeah.
That makes complete sense. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it I can see that you really approach this holistically, both in
Yes.
terms of the horse, but of course, like the rider, the handler is a huge part of that too,
Yeah.
and just kind of boiling it all down
Yeah.
to what you want to keep.
Yeah, it's like tracking it. It's just tracking it. So with all the horses that I've come along, and then all the people, they all give you like you all I learn from them. Like, what are you doing? What don't you know? Because I just of course assumed everyone was like me and my skills went through the roof when I learned how to do this. Well, I teach some people all those things, but they'd have struggle learning it, or seeing what I was seeing. And it just made me realize that this thing's a lot more complex. And like, so you'll see me like when I presented a clinic, I'm like, I'm looking at the horse is easy. The horse is really
Mm.
easy. And then I got to look at the person and like they're a little bit more complex, but I always have a lot of, I teach them, but every single person will get my complete dignity and respect because they're me.
Yeah,
They are me, and I will never forget being that. Never.
right. That's part of the journey to being a great horse person, which is a lifelong journey, is
Yeah.
inevitably looking back and being disappointed and even ashamed at things that you've done in the past because you just didn't know. And something that we say a lot on this is you can't do better if you don't know better, or along those lines. And that's why we're all learning. And you describe yourself as, a total nerd, and something that we hear. My sister and I have spoken, we've had hundreds of conversations at this point with Ride IQ members, other amateur horse
Yeah.
owners. And one of the most interesting patterns of the people that we speak to is them, without us teeing it up at all, saying that they're a horse nerd. Like somehow the people who have kind of come into the orbit are people who just have this curiosity and want to learn more. So I think
Yeah.
that that is something that a lot of people listening probably find relatable, and they're just on a different part of their path than you are.
Yeah.
Which is why it's nice to have you here helping us on the path. Um, I'm tempted to start on the rider side of things
Yeah, go
because
for it.
what you said just piqued my interest. What are things that you see most often in riders that you need to make them aware of that is hindering them? Like when you described yourself as a rider on scooter, it seems like you were imposing your anxiety on him. What are some of the common things that somebody listening could check in with themselves and say, like, am I doing that? And from here, I kind of want to talk about how do we bring ourselves back to neutral so we're not doing all this subconscious
Yeah.
detrimental work.
So a lot of time I get people off the horse because they're actually feeling vulnerable and they've lost their nerve or they're not confident. And when your body is not confident, it takes over. It becomes tense. It's going into the fetal position all the time, and it's not being like a body that allows that motion, that important locomotive energy to go through them, so they end up hampering the horse more. So that's where I pull them off. It's like we got to build some trust back. We got to show your subconscious self that you're not in danger. We got to lower the sense of alarm in your body. So I pull them off the horse and I get them to work with the horse on the ground so they get to lose that on the ground, and then I transfer it to the saddle. So that's what I do first of all, because I can't tap into anyone's seat until they're not thinking they're gonna die, right? That's very important. Then the next thing that I have to stop is the whole micromanaging, because that's what I was doing with Scooter, right? I was putting him in a bind, and he was worried about that bush. I have to go past it. I'd put him into a shoulder in and stuff like that. I was wrestling him around, which means what I was doing is I was constantly doing pressure, 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 pressure. Now, what a good rider like you does that you probably don't realize you do is that horses find you incredibly easy to follow because you're silent. right? You'll pick a line or whatever you're doing and you will ride that line. You're not fussing about this over there. You're more looking up and riding. The horse has been able to have a lot more clarity about what you want them to do, and they're not being like hassled, because it's like I was going, like shoulder in, collect, like micromanaging every step to stop the potential spook. But all that is pressure, 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 pressure. The horse never gets to breathe and just follow and learn to track you. Wherever they go is pressure. So, of course, their blood pressure goes up. They get alarmed and then they become more reactive to their environment. So, it's a self fulfilling prophecy. So, getting people to be more aware of that, I've got to take the tension out of their body as well, make them feel more in control and become more conscious on what I'm asking them to actually do. The next thing they do is kind of related to that, is that they don't look where they're riding, right? They don't. I have this thing. If people only listen to one thing from this podcast, and you take one thing I say from it that you can check and you can test for yourself, is look up and ride somewhere. Okay, so with my mentor, when I was starting out, there would still be like I got really good, but there'd be the odd horse I'd get on, and it would be like funny about going up the end of the arena or something like that, or be distracted by something in the paddock across the thing, and I'd be really frustrated because I'd be doing all the things. So I'd ask him to get on. I just needed to watch to be reassured it was me. He'd get on, and the horse didn't care about anything. Now I rode better than him. I was a better load to carry. But as soon as he got on, the horses were like, they didn't care. And it took me, I remember a long time, I tried to work out what he was doing because I kept thinking it was something like, are you putting your leg on here? Are you doing that? Are you punishing that? Are you correcting this? What is it? And everything he'd do, I'd do, and it just wouldn't work. And then one day I said to him, what are you thinking when you ride? Like, what do you think? And he was like, huh? Like, what? That was a weird question, because it's bloke. So you can learn a lot from blokes and their minds, because it's like the female mind is all like, bzzz, and the
Right.
man's just got this beautiful single thought, right? And he just said to me, "It's like, well, I'm riding over there." So I was like, oh, I've never thought of that. Like something so simple. So all as I did was just change where I look, and suddenly I can ride the horse anywhere, because I was giving the horse somewhere to suck into. And that's why sports like eventing, like chasing cows, like show jumping, because the person has to look up and ride somewhere. That's actually one of the things you learn. Like, you get gold from every discipline, right? They've all got a strength. And
Mhm.
that's one of the strengths of those disciplines, is that you have to look up and ride somewhere. And needless to say, those riders will be put in the category as the brave riders, even though they're not necessarily brave. They're just experts at what they're doing and they don't feel uncomfortable. Yeah, so there's that. That's a big thing. The other thing is to start becoming aware of, how do you ask your horse to do? How do they know and how do they respond? So if I get someone that wants to, like, they want a riding lesson, they're not interested in the groundwork stuff, right? Sometimes people, I have to just play a long game with them, right? And they want to ride. I say, okay, ask your horse. I watch them, right? I say, okay, ask your horse to walk on. Now halt. Now walk on again. Like, I just get them to repeat something and I'll watch. And 9 times out of 10, every time they ask their horse to go, they'll ask a different way. And every time they ask to stop a horse, they'll ask it 4 different ways. They're not even aware of that. Sometimes they'll kick, or they'll just use the whip, or they'll, click them on, or say, trot, walk on, and then halting, they're just pulling on the reins, or they're saying, well, there's no consistency, none at all. So they're not aware of how they ask. And the other thing, they don't test what they ask. So normally what I'll do is, the first thing after I work out where they are, I tell them to stop. And it's like, okay, let's pick up one rein. Let's see what the horse understands about the bit. Because that's the thing that blew my mind with my horse all that time ago. And one of the main reasons why I was so blown away by never checking what the horse understood or becoming aware of it, is that I had lessons not from just the instructor down the road. I had lessons from people that had gone to the Olympics, and no one had ever ever check to see whether my hard-mouthed horse actually understood the bit. So pick up one rein. How does your horse respond to it? Is it just a beautiful and soft flow, like they're following it? Or is it like this? Do they brace? Right? And you got to pull them around. Or like with my horse, that particular horse, I picked up this rein and he went
The other
the
way.
opposite direction. So become aware of that. When you put your legs on, does a horse actually know what that means? Or do you have to dig your spur in? Because if you have to dig your spur in, they don't understand. Okay? They're having to respond from from adversive pressure. It's like you and I having a conversation and you only understand me when I scream at you, right? Instead of just ask you. Because they can't hear the whisper. And so imagine that if we had a relationship where I screamed at you and physically had to yank you around, would you like me? Would you like me riding you? As people got to be aware of that. So there we go. I hope that's some things for people to have a think about and reflect on when they get on their horse.
Very helpful. And that describing screaming versus whispering or speaking, you can see why a horse in this case would go numb to and just like deaf to anything you're trying to say. You just tune it out after a while. Um, I think those are some really good things that people can check in with themselves about. I mean, that's a lot of work they could get into if they really took everything you just said and started experimenting with it. So that was perfect. I have a question from a member that she sent in ahead of time that I think might be an interesting place for us to start on the horse side of things.
Sure.
So I'm going to read the email. It's a little bit long, so forgive me, but this will be kind of
Okay.
like a case study that we can do together.
Okay.
So she said, "Hi," she said, "Dr. Appleton," I'll say Shelly. She said, "Hi, Shelly. My OTTB is a 7-year-old gelding doing AA low-level eventing at schooling shows with goals of doing recognized shows or beginner novice sometime before I have to stop riding. Brio is in his 3rd year with me. I'm a mature rider and an adult learner. I started riding at 38 years old, doing saddle seat first, then switched to dressage, trail riding and competitions, a little polo cross, fox hunting, and only started eventing and jumping 5 years ago. Brio is not an in your pocket guy. He tolerates grooming and all the stuff, is smart and willing with groundwork, great under saddle mostly. They all have their moments. His biggest drawback is being so buddy sour that he screams and screams at shows when he's left by his barn buddy. Even at local shows, when we have to tie to a trailer, he gets very anxious and loses any focus on me, if I even had any to start with. He steps all over me, pays no attention to voice or halter corrections. It's frustrating, and I'm worried that the stress will negatively impact both of us in the long run. She said, I have 3 OTTBs at home, so they pretty much live together. My daughter owns one of them and is doing the same riding, competing, so we travel to lessons, shows, events together. Um, that's just what we do. She said, how can I work with Brio to mitigate this behavior? Thank you, from Linda.
Oh, this is a great question. Because if there's one thing I want to help people understand, it's the separation anxiety buddy sour. Because what that actually is a horse being a horse. When you understand what is being triggered in the horse, right? So imagine a horse has a switch in their head. Horses are herd animals, right? And part of their uh, evolution, why they're still here, is that horses are not born to navigate the world alone. They form teams with other horses. And it's not for being friends and for comfort. It's not. It's for protection. It's their, multiple sets of eyes, ears, and nose are much better at scanning that environment than just one. Okay. So when a horse is, I call it a herding instinct, called herding or flocking, depending on the animal. Okay. Whether it's bird or fish or schooling or whatever. When they get stressed or they feel threatened, the switch goes off, the instinct gets off. And what happens is that you can't stop it. It's a switch. It's completely involuntary, and they will be drawn to other horses because, as we've seen, just imagine you're watching an African safari or you're watching the herds, the Mustang herds being gathered. They form a herd and they move. It's a protection thing. It's a form of collective intelligence of nature because one horse running is one thing for a predator, but 6, 8, 10 of them, that's one formidable one mass that's moving, right? So when a horse feels threatened, they get separation anxiety or buddy sour. So horses that are more prone to experiencing that uh, can be horses. So it's saying a number of things, and this is what you've got to do. Are they feeling threatened by what's about to happen to them or what's happening to them? So it just tells you how a horse feels. Horses feeling alarmed and potentially threatened, and the switch has gone off on their head, right? That can happen as the horse ages. It can happen when a horse is injured. It can happen when a horse is doing, which is very frustrating with horses, is that they are struggling physically, but they're not limping. All right. So it can sometimes be the first sign that something's not right. They can do it if you don't have the greatest relationship with them and what they're going through is very arduous for them. So jumping can be something when they start getting some soundness niggles that they'll start getting concerned about. Okay, it can be that. So they're the main things. There is another type, but I still believe is so. If you asked me about a year ago, I'd say, oh, well, some horses just they're not so great in their sensory systems, right? They're not so robust at it. They're slow processing, right? They're slower processing it. So they need others' help. So they feel a little bit alone, right? They don't have a high independence because independence is a trait that people have to understand that horses can have. The more independent a horse, the more of a champion they can be, right? So they're not very independent horses, and that can be why. But what I found out is those horses typically have something going on. They've got something going on. So the herding reflex is being triggered in this horse. So our question is, why? Was he always like that? Or is it something that's come on? If he was always like that, okay. But if it's something that's crept on and got worse, red flag, you've got some soundness things going on. There's some niggles happening, right? And so he's then associating doing the job or being away because the switch goes off when they feel vulnerable inside. As I said, an older horse, as a horse ages, can become more buddy sour. It's because it's a natural thing that they know they're more vulnerable for being able to get away. So they stick closer to their friends, or their, eyesight's going, they're getting older. And of course they're going to suck to it, suck to their friends to do that job. So if he hasn't done it before and it's getting worse, red flag. Okay. Otherwise, what you can do about it. So this is where you clean up how he feels about everything. Make sure his feet are good. Have you changed farriers lately or something like so? Feet might need shoes. That can be something. Might need to be looked at by a vet, or might have to you want to eliminate every bit of stress that horse is feeling to stop the triggering. So all the compounded stress. So check all your relationship from the get go. Check if he's got any niggles. Get the saddle checked, right? And then what you do is when you get all that checked and you think, okay, you now got to break this kind of a habit thing, is you start working them near the other horses. Bring them a friend, because the cure to getting over it once you have can I just say, normally you cure the discomfort and it disappears, right? But if you do have the odd horse that has just got into this dynamic, right, of panicking, which is not impossible, right? The answer to it is education and getting them latched onto you, right? You've got to get them to see you as what they filter the world through, like they do with their other horses. And you've got to teach that. And it's something you educate them to focus on you. It's all based on focusing on you and learning to follow where you're asking them, where you're guiding them to go. So they get focused on that. And if you're okay, they're okay, right? So sometimes you've got to either start in the paddock with the other horses and get them sucked to you and then slowly stretch them away. Or it might be bringing another horse down to the arena, right? Or working them. Or if you're at a show and they're doing it at shows, is that, use the other horse to your advantage, because you've got to go through that process, and it's got to be conscious of getting that horse to latch onto you. But if you've stretch them apart and they're ruling crazy town, then that's going to make your job harder because you're going to be fighting with them. That's just going to be feeding them, be feeling threatened. So get that other horse close by, settle them, okay, and then start working with them. Follow me, follow me, follow me, right? And then you can stretch them out. Yeah. So how does it go? It's just a little bit complicated. Sorry, it was a bit complicated, but that's how you got to look at each case. I just think, okay, your herding instincts being triggered. All right, let's dial into this. Why? So if it's something that's come on and got worse, red flag, you might have a bit of arthritis that's creeping in, etc.
That is really interesting. So does the work, if you rule out the physical pain, it sounds like that would be a more unlikely case, but if that's the case and you start working with your horse with their buddy next to them,
Hmm.
what does it look like? Is it groundwork exercises that could it be anything on the ground that you're doing just to get them tuned into you, and kind of interjecting yourself in that relationship as you help them be more comfortable with distance between them and their buddy?
Yeah, so this is where the rider will come in or the owner will come in. It's just like with you, right? And I make sure that the horse is not having an argument to get to the mounting block, right? And I ensure that all it's tuned up so it responds to the bit nice and everything like that. I'll go, okay, we're going to do this in the saddle, right? And what it is, you got to focus on the simple things. It's the power of the basics. So it's just asking those. And what I tell people to do is like, I just say, if it was you and you had a horse that's doing this and we ruled it all out, I say, right, you're going to ride the best goddamn figure of 8 of your life. Something very simple, right? A very simple question, a very simple thing for them to follow that's not too complex, right? And what you'd see is that horse starts off a bit gnarly, right? And then you'd see it smooth out, right? Just ride it. Get on your horse, start riding small figure eight. I'm talking small, like 4 meter circles, like small, right? Small, ride just the same one. Just keep riding it. You will sit, just look up, ride the best goddamn figure of 8 of your life. So do the best riding, right? And then what you'll see will happen is that the horse will be all like a little all over the shop, and then suddenly you'll see it go bang, right? And you'll start going, oh, they're with me, they're with me. And then what you do is slightly change it, right? Slightly change where it is. Now, the other tip that I've got comes from Nick Dowers, who's a Nevada cowboy. He's very good in reining cow horse. He says this incredibly helpful tip that when you've got a horse that's drawing somewhere, right, that wants to go back, you do that. Okay, you're getting them with you, but what you do to stretch them further away and to snap that herding link, right, is go back before they want to. So don't trigger the crazy. Don't feed it. When you feel those feet start getting a bit sticky, you go back and fill up on that. Get them back with you because it's the education, it's their ability to learn. When they're in that learning mindset that you can get in their head, right? And you can get them with you. It's that magical thing that we don't understand. What it is, it's focus and attention on you, right? Not on the rest of the world or the other horse or their friend, and stretching it out. Yeah. So turn
Interesting.
back. And then what you find by doing that, you keep the crazy hasn't been triggered, right? They haven't got overwhelmed. You've got them learning, and then they'll just learn. They learn if you're just stretch them out, and then off you go, right? And that process might take a while. You if it was quite bad, you might have to go through that process for a week or so. Now, if it's someone that's more, just say like me, I would start in the paddock. So I
Mhm.
go to their paddock, just working them in the paddock, checking their holder responses and leading them away. Okay, you can start there, right? Depending on how, start there. Yeah, and there can be there's a lot of different strategies, but the strategies do not trigger the crazy. And the other thing is, don't think you can do it with the horse standing still, right? Motion is important. Motion is very important for the horse. It allows you to read them better. It gives far better data evidence to you about what's going on with them. And they're horses that process their stress in motion. So it's a lot more It's a lot more conducive to what you want to achieve.
Thank you for that. That's very clear advice. I think I think Linda will be pleased just with the clarity and
Yeah,
actionability of what you just provided. So thank
yeah,
you. Let's talk about other ways. Of course, that's I'm sure something that you see people coming to your clinics for.
oh
Talk
yeah,
about other, let's call them symptoms that horses present at your clinics that people are wanting help with that are indicating a confidence or confusion issue. And then we don't have we could learn from you for hours and hours, but and then let's just give people some tools to start at assessing, like, is this a me rider issue? Is this a physical issue? Just so that they can kind of start trying to self-assess behaviors
yeah.
that they're seeing in their horse that fall under your umbrella of helpfulness.
Yeah. Interesting you say that because I always collect. I should get people to write down what's the problem. What do they want to know from me? Like, what are you trying to get?
Yes.
Number one, top of the list, I want a better relationship with my horse, right? Because they feel that conflict. They love their
Mhm.
horse, yet they know they're having to wrangle it. Number two, confidence, right? Really, the first people are saying the same thing as well. Then I'll get specific things. So, a very common, very specific thing is canter. People really struggle with canter and cantering their horse. Because that's another thing, just going back to the question you asked me before about problems with people in the saddle. You have to be able to go with that horse's natural way of going. What people want to do is they're scared of speed. A lot of people are scared of speed and they're blocking it. So the poor horses can't get its natural flow on. So, yeah, so they're the top three, I just say partnership, confidence, and cantering. Okay. Then there will be some very specific issues like mounting, even dismounting is a common problem. Contact issues are big as well. Yeah. So they're the main ones. And they're actually all dealt with exactly the same way, believe it or not. Okay. I all deal with them the same way. So I listen to everyone. Hand me your horse and we're going to look at it. Okay. So I will always start off a horse in the round yard or the round pen, I don't know if you want to call it, and I'll work with it at liberty. Now, I call it round penning, but this round penning is like you say round penning, and it's like saying I ride horses, but you might be a hunter jumper, or you might do reining, or it's not specific enough what I actually do in there. And I have a very simple way of round penning horses. I'm not chasing them. I'm watching them. If I'm working, I'm communicating with them through their hardwired instincts that are in them by triggering their sensory system to teach them something, to focus on me and to follow very simple visual cues like a sign language, right? So I tap into their eyes first, right? And what I'm doing in there is I'm watching them. I'm watching how easily they learn. I'm watching their emotional response, right? Of how they feel, right? I'm looking to see how they hold their body, right? And if they can canter, because the sheer majority of these horses that have cantering problems, I put them in with no one on their back and they're struggling to canter. So then imagine how much harder it is for that horse. Can't even canter with no one on its back. Yet they're trying to canter on its back, plus they're holding it in a frame. It's just totally struggling. So that process tells me so much. The other way I can tell a heap about a horse is just putting its holder on and I back it up. I back a horse up. So what can you tell from a horse of backing it up? I can tell if it understands the halter at all, or if it's having to be wrangled, right? Because what's the killer for the horse, both relationship wise and body health wise, is bracing. Right? So I want everyone, when you go out to your horse, put your holder on and pick it up and watch what your horse does because, you know, 95% of the time the horse will do this when you ask it to back up. It will brace because you got something on its head, right? That it's primarily, and if you haven't got that halter really tuned and nice and soft, when you pick it up, they will brace to protect themselves. They're protecting themselves by habit. And that's a bit of a key that you got something going on there, right? So backing a horse up. So I go through a process of backing them up and getting them back off one finger, right? Just by repeating that. And then I notice how they learn that. Was it easy? Was it hard? If it's hard, red flag. Red flag. If horse struggles to learn to back up a few steps nice and soft, red flag. Something wrong with the body. I watch how they back up. So watch. Does your horse back up with clear diagonal pairs? Because the back up is like trot. It's in diagonal pairs. And then I watch, can they go straight? Where their feet go? Because backup's not a natural thing. Horses don't back up a lot in nature. They don't get themselves into spots of backing up. So asking us to back up is a little bit unnatural, but it also reveals, because their body's got to do a whole lot of things that we tap into when we ride, believe it or not. When you ask them to do that on the ground, no on the back, you can tell a lot about them. What they understand about pressure, how they protect themselves, and how they can do it, and if they have some restriction through their body or difficulty in being able to learn that. So they're little things people can do, but they're all related to the same thing, if that makes sense.
What an interesting quick test to do, the
Yeah.
backing up.
Cool.
In the round pen, do you have any kind of like exercises people could do? Because I totally hear what you're saying about round penning being just this very broad description of so many things that can go on in there. For
Yeah.
people who are feeling a little bit uncertain what to do once they get to the round pen, what do you suggest for just dipping their toe into that sort of
Yeah. I
relationship
would,
building?
yeah, I'd watch some guidance videos, because you see there's things and people don't understand. Horses have, we call it the drive line, okay, with horses. But if you know about cows, they call it the point of balance. Now, what that is, it's actually a visual thing. It's a sensory thing on a horse. That's a survival mechanism. And what it is, if you're looking at a horse side on, imagine where the girth sits, right? That's called the drive line. And this is why some people struggle to even lunge a horse, because if a horse senses pressure or presence behind that line, and their sensory system gets triggered to move by, just say, the movement of the end of a rope or a whip or a flag, they will move forward. If they sense pressure in front of that line, they will turn around and go backwards. So that's a common reason why people struggle with lunging, is that they put themselves in front of that line, and then so their body's saying, turn away from me, and then they're applying pressure. So what normally happens is the horse will either stand on its back legs or it will pull away. People don't understand. So you need to understand your body. That's why I love putting horses back in the round yard with nothing on their face to disrupt them and piss them off, right? And I put people in there to start getting awareness of their body and how they move, and having to keep themselves on the drive line and you can feel it, you can sense it. So I always say, look, if you're going to get in there, watch something. Go on a YouTube. I've got a whole course on it, but go on a YouTube, watch it. And then you're just asking you're creating a visual language. So you've got to create meaning first. So I just use a hand, like round penning is easy. I just use a hand point. Like hand point to go this way, right? And then hand lifts to go into upward transitions. Very raw. The round pen is raw. You allow it to be, it's the way that I do, my way of using it is the most simple thing a horse can learn, because you're tapping into these hardwired sensory things. So you're triggering responses that help them learn quick. You can watch them move, and you can watch how they posture. And I love getting people to watch, because it's in that space when they're all standing around the outside of the round pen and they're watching me work a horse. I'm asking them questions to trigger their attention onto something. Because I'll tell you now, Jessa, people actually have tremendous ability to be able to read horses if you direct the question. Because I'll say to them, I said, what percentage of this horse's thoughts are on me? And they'll go like, none. And I'll go, correct. Okay, let's change that. So note how they are now, and then we're going to look at it again at the end. Then I'll say, how does this horse feel? Right? Out of 1 to 10, how do they feel in terms of stress? And I said, right, well, watch me tap into that they're probably going to get a bit stressed first, but then watch it come down when they understand. Watch how that stress level changes as they work out they're okay. And then I ask them about posture. Tell me about the posture. What's the tail doing when they're going around? What's their body doing? Are they counterbend? See how that's different? That's that way than going the other way. And then it's like, where's their head height? Because horses' head and where their neck goes is a counterbalance for the rest of their body to make themselves feel like balanced, right? You read a lot from that. Oh, look, that way they have their head low, and that way they have their head high. Interesting. Okay. Or how do they canter? And then I ask people, so who'd like to ride that canter there? Was that a good transition? Would you like to be riding that? Okay, so maybe we should get this sorted out before we go sit on their back. So I direct their questions, but it's in there. So I would recommend it. And canter, Jessa, canter. I call my podcast is called Canter Therapy, right? Because canter is a vital pace, a very important gait for the inside of the horse on multiple levels. The diaphragm and the action of the diaphragm. When a horse walks and trots, the diaphragm works on one mechanism, but when they canter and gallop, the mechanism changes. It gets connected to hind leg movement, and it can do this fabulous thing of where it can open up and really unstick the insides of those horses. So a lot of horses with canter issues actually have a diaphragm issue. So you get them cantering, and you can see them actually completely change in that regard. So and not only that, especially when you get your off the track thoroughbreds, right? They've been trained to act on their adrenaline, right? To run. Well, we don't want them to act on that. Well, you might in cross country, but you want to be able to tell them when to act on it and when to chill with it, right? And it's in the round yard, you teach them to do that. It also uses up horses that are chronically stressed. It helps use that up because it utilizes all what the stress hormones have pumped into the body, the adrenaline, the cortisols put a whole lot of energy in that boils if they're not used it up. So it uses it up. So it has a great effect on the body and on the mind and the overall emotions. Yeah, so it's powerful.
I love the suggestion, or I love calling out that when you prompt people through this stuff, they can see it. And
Oh, absolutely.
that, I mean, we kind of need to become the voice in our own head, and it takes a
Yeah,
lot of being educated. It takes a lot of having a trainer or clinician or anybody doing the prompting, but finding a way to start integrating that into your own brain as a rider or a horse person makes it possible to like have those observations and start being a
yeah,
little bit more self-sufficient. It makes a lot of sense, and it's really, really interesting. All of this is incredibly interesting. I truly could learn from you forever, I think. This You just have an incredible way of educating and weaving your insights in a way that is like a makes it easier to understand.
yeah,
But also it's not, it's not dead simple. That's why it takes a long time to become well versed, and that's why it's a never ending an endeavor to
yeah,
understand these animals and what we're doing with them. But I am so appreciative of you for sharing with us all of this like hard earned insight that you have. I would love to know where people can find you online or learn more from you, anything that they can do after the fact to kind of start looking more into your work.
sure. So my website is calmwillingconfidenthorses.com.au. If you just type in Dr. Shelley Appleton, you'll also find it. I am on social media. So Facebook, I'm Dr. Shelley Appleton, Calm, Willing, Confident Horses. Bit of a mouthful, but that's actually you actually create calm, willing, confident horses. You actually consciously construct and nurture them, and it's kind of a fun process when you do it. So you can find me on Facebook. I do have Instagram at Calm, Willing, Confident Horses or at Dr. Shelley Appleton. I have to admit that I struggle with Instagram because I
Mhm.
like writing things that are long or
Yes.
are doing things that are long, and Instagram doesn't let me do that. So I've got 300 followers or something on Instagram, but I've got like 22,000 on Facebook or something. Yeah, so Facebook's the best place to actually find me, although I'm trying with the whole Instagram thing. But yeah, that's where you find me. On my website explains a lot about what I do and how I structure um, this evolution that I want people to actually have or be able to follow. And of course, Facebook's always there for some inspiration.
Amazing. And Canter Therapy podcast?
Yeah, Cancer Therapy podcast. Yeah, listen through that one. The early ones were a bit cringy because we had terrible sound, but we got better with that. And my co-host, Kat, bless her, I adore her, but she used to get stage fright to begin with, so it's all just like me talking, being awkward, because she would just shut down on me. But she's got better and better, and she actually asks way better questions than I do, but it's taking us a while. So yeah, we've got some pretty cool guests and some topics that we discuss there.
I love it. There was I don't know who to credit this to, but somebody said that if you're not embarrassed by your early version of whatever you're working on,
Yeah,
then you launched too late. So I think we all look back on stuff and find it very cringy. I know that I do, but that's just part of that's just part of it. So, well, this was such a treat. I'm so happy to know you. Truly, thank you so much for spending an hour teaching us. I know that I speak for a lot of people in that gratitude. So thank you so much. And
yeah,
I
thank
hope you
you.
have a whole day ahead of you. I hope you have a wonderful
I
day.
do. And you have a good night.
Yes. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We will see you next week. Bye guys.
Okay. Thanks, Jessa. Bye.